All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to AP US History. Today we're going to be beginning our look at the Revolutionary War, the war itself. That is our goal for the day. So we're going to be covering a lot, so be sure to pay attention. Now, getting into the revolution, we see that the people in the colonies are divided into three categories. And this pie chart obviously is showing what that is. So first we have the patriots. These are the people who support separation from England. They want independence. They want us to be our own nation. The loyalists, obviously they're loyal to Great Britain. They want to stay British colonies. And then we have the neutral people. These are ones they can't decide which side they want to support, or they just don't care and want to go about their lives and just, whoever's in charge, okay, I'll pay my taxes to that person. That's fine. All right. But how did we get to this point again? Let's go through that timeline real quick. So, 1750, the colonists, they're basically autonomous, self governing, under this policy called salutary negligence, where they basically just get to run things how they see fit. But then the French and Indian War happens, and a lot of British money gets spent defending the colonies. And that is that big turning point that causes a bunch of issues because now salutary neglect is ended and the British are going to impose greater authority over the colonies. They're going to start raising taxes to help pay off those war debts, and they're not allowing representation in parliament for the colonies. And it really starts to get bad once that proclamation of 1763 gets put in place, because that is not allowing them to travel west of the Appalachian Mountains into this newly won territory that they got from France. And then we have taxes like the Stamp Act, where there's extra cost on all paper products. Then the Townshend Acts, the Sons of Liberty are forming, and they are basically helping cause stirring the pot, shall we say, of trying to get problems out in the open. They're doing protests, they're staging riots, all this stuff. We have the Boston Massacre, where 5 people are shot and killed by British soldiers. And then we have the Boston Tea Party, where thousands of tons of tea are dumped into the harbor, costing millions of dollars essentially to the British, which leads to the Intolerable Acts, which shuts down Boston and makes it under military control. And this prompts the First Continental Congress, where 12 of the 13 colonies, minus Georgia, are basically like, we need to do something to help Boston because this is insane. So they are going to appeal to the king. It's not going to work. And they're going to start, people are going to start stockpiling weapons and things like that, which is how we get the incident at Lexington and Concord, where the first shots of the revolution are fired, between patriots and the British soldiers. This will in turn also get us the Second Continental Congress, which is going to be where, the Declaration of Independence gets written, and basically transitioning us into the Revolutionary War period. Now, remember, Thomas Paine's Common Sense was basically a pamphlet that was distributed out to the public, showing the people this is what the Second Continental Congress is doing. We are going to go for an independent nation, and this is why. All right. And, of course, by the end of the revolution, we are going to win. But now we're going to see how we got there. Now, we remember that the Enlightenment was a huge inspiration for the Declaration of Independence and all these political ideologies that would spread during this time and get our leaders interested in having a revolution. So, like John Locke, all men are born with natural rights, and the citizens can revolt against a tyrannical government. Rousseau, we have a social contract with the government. They get their power from us, the people. And we have Montesquieu with the separation of powers, the branches of government, checks and balances. They keep each other in check so no one gains too much power. And Thomas Paine, yeah, it is strongly urging colonial separation and independence. Now, how had attitudes changed towards Great Britain? Uh, for a good chunk of people, quite a bit. They're sick of the abuses of the British Crown and they want a change. So, July 1776, enough patriots have basically had enough and they are forming the Second Continental Congress, and they give a 5-man committee the job of drafting the Declaration of Independence. One of the chief members of this committee being Thomas Jefferson, who is the primary author. He wrote the vast majority of the Declaration of Independence based on, the enlightened ideas of John Locke, and explaining why we're even going into rebellion. They're going to lay it all out there on the table for the king and parliament to see. Such as, men are born with natural rights of life, liberty, and property, and citizens have the right to break the social contract with the government when the government becomes tyrannical and abusive of the people. All right. And along with Thomas Jefferson, we have Benjamin Franklin, noted scholar and philosopher of the American colonies. John Adams, future second president of the United States. We also have Robert Livingston and Roger Sherman. All right, so let's take a look at some of the things that are basically being talked about in the Declaration. We should explain why we are declaring independence. All people have natural rights that should not be infringed upon. The government powers comes from the people. You're not born with it, you are allowed to have it. If a government cannot protect people, then the people should create a new government that can. And George III, the King of England, has been abusing his power over the colonies. So these are the reasons we believe that the king has abused his powers. We're going to list out the reasons of things he has done that have royally ticked us off. And we have explained to the king why we are unhappy, but he has chosen to ignore us and continue to put the hurt on us. And finally, because of the king's abusive actions, we are declaring our independence as a new nation. Deal with it. So, to put that all into perspective of the document itself, this is like the first big chunk of the document, the Declaration. And it is in the first full paragraph here. We are basically saying Jefferson is declaring legally and philosophically the justification for revolution to occur. And in the following large paragraph, this is showing the influence of John Locke on why we are declaring independence. Listing it all out. Right? Now, if you haven't seen it before, I strongly encourage you guys to watch the Too Late to Apologize Declaration video. I shared it in the module for the class. So go ahead and watch that. It's very entertaining. All right. Declaration of Independence was the formal demand of separation and the war technically had already begun in 1775, but months later it's made official because of Lexington and Concord, which we talked about last time. Formation of the Continental Army, a true blue professional army, is basically created. And it is put under the command of George Washington, hero of the French and Indian War for the British. Proud, popular, famous Virginian. And yeah, now Americans are going to have to pick sides. Are you a patriot or are you a loyalist? Or do you just not care and want to just stay out of the whole mess and just, when it's figured out, come back into it? Now, Independence Hall, this is a very famous painting for American history. This is basically the Founding Fathers, the Second Continental Congress. Now, Adams, Sherman, Livingston, Jefferson, and Franklin, all right here, front and center. right? Now, choosing sides. That is a big decision for a lot of people during this time. And some things that we need to know about the two opposing armies is, the British. They start out the war very much in the position of power. Their army is 400 times larger and more experienced. They have tons more money. They have the best navy in the world, and they have the ability to manufacture more war supplies, more guns, more ammunition, more black powder, more swords, more cannons, everything to a much, much vaster degree than the colonies. But the colonists, they know the lay of the land. They know how to fight using the land to their advantage. They have the commitment to win the war. The British, they're just there to do a job. They're not fighting for a cause. The colonists who are who are revolting, they have a cause to fight for. That is a big piece of their strength. Also, with talking about supplies, the colonists, they have much shorter supply routes, so their goods, their gear, has a lot less distance to travel to reach them. So the British might get hung up waiting on supplies for a month or two, whereas the Americans might only have to wait a couple of days or a few weeks at most. And the rebels, one of their biggest things is they get to fight a defensive war. They have to outlast the British. They have to make this thing drag out for so long that the British are eventually just going to give up, because it's like, you know what? We've been at this for 10 years. I give up. This is just, it's pointless just to keep fighting. We're just wasting our time and money doing this. That's the goal. Wear them down until they give up. Right? And one thing, the British are very much going to underestimate the resolve of the rebels to win. And, one thing that the British had to do was they had to beat the Continental Army, but that was a little difficult to do since Washington, he typically didn't fight many battles that he thought that he couldn't win. Now, Washington, he's the leader of the Continental Army. He's the poster boy of the movement. He is the symbol of the American cause, the American independence movement. He would have to build a professional army and coordinate the militias, which is, the farmers and city folk who volunteer to fight. They're not professional soldiers, but they want to do their part. And he's going to encourage everybody who wants to help to support the war, even when the British seem like they're going to win, keep the cause alive. Now, we have our three different areas. Continental Army, represented here in this picture, they are the professional soldiers. They are more highly trained. They are the blue coats. Then we have the colonial militias. These are just your average, everyday guys who, they might not participate in all the fights, but, say there's a real big one coming up and it's like, okay, I think I should take part in this. Maybe maybe help the movement on a little bit, and afterward, maybe they'll go home and not fight for 6 months. Then we have the civilians like Molly Pitcher. She is an example of civilians who took up the cause and helped out when they could. She was someone who would travel along with the troops, and she would give troops water, like during battles, like when they would come off from the front line and they would be in the back. She would come around with a pitcher of water and like give the troops water. But in the middle of a battle, she's near a cannon, and one of the guys who operates the cannon gets shot and killed. She joins in and continues to help the cannon fire, giving American troops a chance. Now, the military strategies of the Americans and of the British are a bit different. So, looking at Washington and the Americans, we have to outlast, defend the lands, drag the war out. We're using guerrilla tactics, just like from the French and Indian War. We're doing ambushes or sneak attacks. were going to seek an alliance with the French to help against a common enemy, the British. And the British now, they want to divide and conquer. They have the better trained troops, so they can want to try and use strength to their advantage. They also have the Loyalists. Now, or also known as Tories. They're going to have like whole regiments of Tory soldiers that they will help to use to their advantage. All right, they're also going to encourage slave revolts in the American territories, and hopefully that's going to cause a whole bunch of mayhem. They want to cut the northern and southern colonies in half between each other and, divide it up like in the Maryland, Virginia area, then go north, conquer all that, and then go south and conquer all that. They also want to blockade all the ports, stopping any trade, basically choking them out the Americans so they can't get any supplies or do anything. All right, now let's take a look at some battles. It all starts with Lexington and Concord. We talked about that already. It's the first shots fired. Then we get into the siege of Boston after that. Now, the first 2 years of fighting, all the way up to 1777, it's looking very bleak for the Americans. And, we're just struggling, just hit after hit we're taking. It's not looking good at all. We lose the city of New York. It's captured by the British. A large section of it is burned to the ground. All right. But then we do get a little ray of hope on Christmas Eve, 1776, when Washington and his army crossed the Delaware River to surprise British troops in Trenton, New Jersey. Everyone's seen this famous painting before. The attack on Princeton and Trenton is a huge moral victory for the Americans. What they do is they attack a garrison of like 1,000 Hessian mercenaries. And Hessians are German mercenaries that the British have hired to help them fight. Now, not all German mercenaries were Hessian from the kingdom of Hesse over in Europe, but they were more Hessians than any other German mercenary group, so they were just all called Hessians. And a result of that is there was only one kill that happened, and that was the Hessian commander. The rest of them were all captured and held prisoner by Washington and his troops. Now, from the beginning of the war, Benjamin Franklin is over in France. He becomes very popular while he's there, and he's trying to get an alliance with the French. This is not working out very well because there's nothing that's happened in the war so far that's going to give the French confidence in the Americans being able to win their independence. And they don't want to go to war with the British unless they feel they can win. That's not bad for the French to think it that way. All right? They need to see that the Americans have a chance. That is the key thing. Now, this happens after the Battle of Saratoga in 1777. Saratoga is the turning point. It's a big, major victory. We capture thousands of British troops here as a result of this battle. And France is now joining us as an ally. They're going to start providing support for us. So now the British are starting to be on the run. All right. Now, after Saratoga, a French general by the name of Marquis de Lafayette, he's going to come to Washington, to George Washington, and he's going to help train the American troops so they are more disciplined and they know how to fight even better to help deal more damage and make the British lose and give up faster. And the French Navy, while it's not nearly as big as the British Navy, is still a formidable force. So they are going to be helping in way of trying to cripple the British Navy to help out the Americans. So there's fewer ships that are being used to blockade the American ports, things like that. Now, Spring 1778, tide of war is fully shifted, and the Americans are on track to win, essentially. But that winter, 1777 to 78, the Continental Army almost starves to death at Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. Now, while they are freezing, don't have enough clothing, they're out of food, they continue to hunker down and they train and drill, and and a lot of guys are going to starve and freeze to death, but the army that leaves Valley Forge is hardened, well trained, and ready for a fight. Oh, little key thing also. If any troops were caught trying to desert the army, they were executed by firing squad. Yeah, that's a little rough, but they didn't want word getting out to the British on how dire their situation was. Yeah, it got to the point where they were boiling the leather of their shoes, or what was left of their shoes, to try and make some type of soup broth to drink. It was bad. All right. Now, over the next 3 years, both sides are going to go back and forth with who's winning victories until we get to the Battle of Yorktown, Virginia. This is the final battle. So, the Americans, we have trapped British General Cornwallis, one of their top generals, like the top general, really. And it is us and the French trapping him against the sea, against the Chesapeake Bay. And the French Navy is cutting off escape from the Chesapeake Bay out to the ocean. So the French Navy's here, blocking it, and we're all surrounding here, and they got nowhere to go. Just like this. So they have no choice but to surrender, and that is how the war ends. And as the British troops are marching out of Yorktown after the surrender, to leave North America, or at least to leave the British, the 13 colonies that are now independent, they play a song called "The World Was Turned Upside Down," because literally it has been. A colonial revolution has literally overthrown the rule of a dominant European mother country. That's never happened before. Right? And the war officially is over 2 years later with the signing of a peace treaty called the Treaty of Paris, formally ending the revolution, and it is going to give America full independence and all the territory from the ocean, the Atlantic, to the Mississippi River, everything south of Canada and north of Florida. All this green that you see right here, that's all America now, independent country. And the British, their army is to be removed from all of the American territory back up into Canada, and that's where they must stay. So we go from this in 1754, where we have the French controlling a vast amount of territory and having influence there, and the British on the East Coast and in part of Canada, and the Spanish all down here, to this at the end of the French and Indian War, where it's the Spanish here in the orange, and then the British as the purple, to now in 1783, where a lot of territory has now been seized over to an independent America. That is where we're going to end today. When we return next time, we are going to be taking a look at America's first foray into a independent government, which is the Articles of Confederation. All right. Talk to you guys next time.